Hello, and Helen, thank you so much for doing this and telling us a bit about your background and your interest in photography and specifically mindful photography. So yeah, really appreciate you doing this.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah. And yeah, for those that don't know, we're actually next door neighbors, which is slightly ironic that we're doing a Zoom call, but we're practically, could almost reach out through the window and say hello.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's kind of like being back in COVID times
no, no,
somewhere.
don't. Yeah, no, it is, isn't it? It's very similar to that, which is, it's probably a bit of a link there as well. Um, but before we jump into the photography, I just wanted to say actually from the conversations that we've had and me understanding your background a bit more, for me this is a lot of the things that you've done are exactly what the reinvention rooms in my head was all about. It was about growth, personal growth, exploring new things, trying things that take your personality into different fields, and it'd be really interesting to touch on a few of the things that you are involved in, which are away from your day job because you're an engineer by trade, aren't you? Is that
Yes,
right?
that's
Yeah.
right. So I guess my trying to think where to start. So my day job is as an automotive engineer. So I've worked in that field for I guess over 20 years now. Around 17 years into my career, kind of had an unexpected opportunity of voluntary redundancy, having been working on a really high profile, really important project for the business, which came as a bit of a shock, it would be fair to say. Um, but ultimately, kind of gave me the opportunity to take some time away from the workplace, um, and kind of just work out what it was that I wanted from the next opportunity that I took. Um, and has ultimately led to me working with a totally different company with a culture that suits me better, and to realize just how much energy was being sapped working and existing and surviving in an environment that
Mhm.
ultimately just wasn't the right one for me. So I've now gone from working on high performance sports cars and SUVs to 420-ton mining trucks, which is quite a leap.
Yeah.
Wasn't quite
So they
where I
couldn't be
imagined
as
the career
different,
might
really, could
take
they?
me. But it's, I've gone via sort of autonomous vehicles and other sort of 42-ton trucks was last year. So, just going up in factors of 10
Mm.
vehicle size. Um, so for me, kind of earlier on before that point, I'd kind of had the opportunity to learn a bit about mindfulness, which was something the company had rolled out because, people needed ways to survive. So I kind of had come across it in that context. And then I guess if I click through some slides, so being mindful is about being deliberately aware of your body, mind, and feelings in the present moment, in order to create a feeling of calm. So at the time that I was working at that place, mindfulness for me was like walking from the car park to the office and deliberately paying attention to like the sound of the birds, um, kind of the light in the sky, all of those kinds of things, almost to kind of distract myself from the reality that was about to hit.
Yeah. I
So
mean, you
that was
said
my kind of
you've used a word a couple
moment
of
of
times
calm.
there, Helen, survival, and I'm sure there'd be lots of people, hopefully not too many, but there will be lots of people who felt that that's the experience they have at work. I mean, that's a really
Yeah,
strong word to use, survival.
yeah, absolutely. And, ultimately, whether you consciously do it or not, you end up in a situation whereby you're doing your best to conform with what it is that you think that business wants from you.
Mm.
Um, and I don't think you necessarily realize that you're doing it. It's just what everybody does to kind of just get through that time for whatever reason. Um, and it's not until you're not in that environment and you're somewhere that actually does suit you that suddenly you kind of go, wow, I've got all this energy. Where did that come from?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really interesting.
When did you
So
start to notice?
photography,
Yeah, with sorry,
sorry.
I'm butting in now. I'm really interested with those sort of walks to work. Walk from the car park to the place where you got to survive. Did you start? Was it starting to make a difference? Were you noticing new things in that short period of time with that sort of commute?
I think so. And I think it made a big difference to how I felt. Um, so kind of having that kind of little moment to just appreciate the stuff that was just around you that ordinarily you just scurried past because you had to get into a meeting or whatever. You notice the little things, there's a robin that pops up in about the same kind of place. There's a blackbird that sings on a particular tree and things like that. Things that you would just not pay any attention to, wouldn't have even thought about. And like in the summer, there's like flowers that pop up and things, little, really pretty little flowers that are kind of growing through cracks in the tarmac and stuff that normally nobody ever notices because they're busy rushing past. So it kind of, and I think photography inherently, if you start having an interest in photography, you look at light in a whole different way. Um, and I'm sure I've probably banged on about it in conversations that we've had in the past, Charlie. That, especially at this time of year, that as the sun rises, you get this beautiful, warm, golden light. That just makes the world feel so much better. We've gone
Mm,
through the winter, which is all dark and cold and miserable, and then suddenly, sort of this time of year, you start to get those really lovely sunrises, and especially if it's a bit cloudy, you get all the colours as well. Um, so I think as a photographer, you kind of get tuned into light. So I've described it, there's the dictionary definition, which is the skill or activity of taking or processing pictures, um, which is the dictionary definition. But then actually, a lot of photographers talk about painting with light.
that's really
So
beautiful.
it's like capturing images. So I spent a lot of my life after school kind of going, oh, I really wish I'd done art. I like felt I didn't have any artistic skill whatsoever. So picking up a camera gave me that kind of creative outlet that ordinarily I felt I didn't have. That's changed a little bit now because I actually do watercolor painting as well,
Mm,
which was another thing that I started doing during my sabbatical and realized that actually I really enjoyed it. I'm not brilliant by any stretch of the imagination, but just taking that time in my week to be creative, I find really energizing and I really enjoy it.
mm,
So I think really go find the thing that you enjoy doing.
yeah.
Doesn't have to be something that you create masterpieces with, but just that process of unlocking the other side of your brain is really interesting.
Yeah.
And for me as an engineer, in my working life, everything needs to be really precise,
Mm.
lined up, and neat. Um, but I actually can't paint in that way at all, not even remotely. If I try and draw a square, it's on some sort of wonky angle. If I try and work from a reference, what I create is totally different. Um, and yet there are other people who paint and perfectly replicate references and things. So for me, it's a really interesting way of looking at how the other side of my brain works.
Mm.
And actually having that creative outlet makes me feel much better. And I kind of wish that I'd figured that out a long time ago because life could have been really good, really good a lot sooner. But yeah, I digress a little bit because this is
Yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to be about mindful
No, no,
photography.
no, no. No, it's really interesting.
Um, so having done a bit of mindfulness previously, one of the photographers that I follow is a chap called Paul Sanders, who runs a, a sort of an online photography thing called Discover Still. Um, and we'd just gone into, I think we'd been in lockdown for a few months and everyone's kind of locked in their houses, going to go into like stir crazy. And this email comes through going, I'm running this online mindful and contemplative photography workshop. Drop us an email if you're interested. Um, so I think it was supposed to be a 3-week course that started on the 17th of April. But I was really lucky to be part of an incredible group of photographers, all with totally different styles, different approaches to photography. Um, but we just gelled really, really well as a group. And so we ended up our 3 week course sort of started in April 2020 and continued through to March 2021.
That's good value
And
then,
we've
isn't it,
kind
for
of
a
met
course?
up regularly since then.
Mm.
Um,
And Paul
so
Sanders,
that was,
and he was the former picture editor, wasn't he, of the Times?
yes.
And he went
Um,
through depression, didn't he? Had burnout, and uh,
yeah,
yeah, he's got a really interesting story.
yeah. So I'd been to one of his talks previously at the camera club that I was part of, and sort of had been following him since. And I think another part of it was, recognizing how difficult everything was then, was kind of going, well, this is something that I can do that also help somebody out as well. Um, but it was such an inspiring group. So one of the ladies who was part of the group also writes poetry in haikus. So during the course of the workshop, I ended up having a go at some of that as well, which I hadn't really touched since school. So yeah, it was an incredible break. Still in contact with people, had a couple of the um, group up with me last weekend taking photographs of owls, which was really good fun. But yeah, we actually ended up a really close-knit group. So when we met up for the first time, even though we'd only ever seen sort of head and shoulders of each other, it was just like meeting up with old friends from university, because obviously over the course of a year, we had
Yeah,
some quite deep
no, I
conversations.
bet.
And that was, I kind of think it was May 21 was when I left my previous organization. So it was really good to have that kind of support network of really positive, encouraging people as I was kind of jumping into the unknown a bit.
Mm.
So elements of mindfulness, it's about being excited about the world, almost looking at it as if, you're a child again. What's all the things that are exciting that you just don't notice normally? Not really being judgmental of anything. Most of the pictures that I'm going to show you with you tonight were taken on a mobile phone. And actually, the pictures like this tulip sequence, um, I can only really take with a mobile phone. I can't recreate that kind of image with my proper camera, as it were. So I think it doesn't really matter what tool you're using.
Mm. And
Um,
that can be a real barrier, can't it? When you start off in something like photography or some kind of skill with expertise that you think, oh, I need to have all the kit. It's going to cost a fortune, and it's amazing
yeah,
what can be done.
yeah, absolutely. And get yourself a bunch of tulips, and frankly, you could probably get some that are in the kind of emergency, these need a home pile, for really not a lot of money. And photographers are a little bit like this. There's something really, really beautiful about tulips as they start to fall apart and dry out and decay, because you get all these wonderful textures in the petals. Um, and kind of they make some really interesting shapes. They almost look like dancers sometimes. So I think kind of just having some fun with things like that and kind of keeping them at the point at which most people have put them into the green recycling bin, never to be seen again. You've got weeks of
Mm.
enjoyment that you can have with them. Um, and I think being grateful for the things that you do have,
Mm.
and sharing the knowledge and experience that you have are all really, really positive things. And patience. Patience is a big one. So my sort of proper photography, as it were, tends to be with wildlife. So I spend a lot of time standing in a field, watching the world go by, waiting for something to happen,
Mm.
and just being able to just enjoy that moment for what it is, or many moments, as the case may be, um, is a really good thing.
Yeah.
So within the mindful photography workshop that I did, we had an assignment, which was to go to the same what's 3 words location every day for 6 days. So this is kind of these are the pictures that I took at the time. So this is sort of the first one is looking at this is the 3 meter square that I chose.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
that's
you kind of start
my
off
fence
going,
as well in the background.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it's a very beautiful picture of your fence, Charlie. um, and so kind of day one, I start thinking about, okay, so what is there within this square? Really like the water droplets that are on the leaf, and this kind of curve on the clematis flower that kind of just led itself into the spiral of the plant support. Then we got to day three. I decided that I really like this view up the plant support with the different sky,
Mm.
and the way the light was coming through the leaves on the irises. Um, those kind I really get drawn to how that light and shade plays and the patterns that it makes. And then there's this tiny new little leaf coming along, that kind of, gives you a bit of hope that, more leaves and flowers are coming. Um, Day four, I was like, okay, I feel like I've done quite a lot with this clematis. And I started looking at the fence in a bit more detail, and I discovered that there are some dots that look remarkably like eyes.
Mm.
And so there's this sort of slightly Picasso-ish kind of collage. Almost looks a bit like a nose, doesn't it? And a bit of
Yeah.
a slightly happy, slightly sad face. Um, Day five, it was like, because of the beautiful clouds in the sky, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to see if I can. I took lots of pictures looking up, and then kind of went, well, is there a way that I can get all of these to interconnect?
Mm.
Um, which, the things you
Yeah,
do when
super.
you've got not so much time. And then the last picture is looking a little bit more widely. So at that point, one of the irises, it was just about to come into flower. Um, I think that's a euphorbia, from memory. And then this Veronica, it just popped up as well.
Mm.
So it's quite an interesting activity to kind of go back to literally the same 3 meters and go, okay, what's here?
Yeah.
Um, which could be anywhere, it could be your doorstep. Um, so that was kind of the first one. So I've talked a bit about light already. So kind of the different qualities that light has, the different kind of moods that it can evoke. This one in the bottom right hand corner was, it was raining, and suddenly there's these lovely patterns on the paving. Um, Big dramatic skies are always
Mm.
fun, and then kind of just the evening light flowing through a flower. Um, I think this one was on the theme. I think it was essentially kind of on your daily outings, go take pictures.
Yeah.
So this for me, obviously, it's autumn. Charlie, you'll probably recognize some of these trees.
Yes.
Um, so this is the footpath next to
Yeah.
where we live. Um, so I kind of trudged along, trying to find different things to take. So these trees are great fun because they're sort of this beautiful gold and silver color, depending on which way the leaves are looking. Um, Kind of different lighting conditions and things. I think this was in the garden. And then one particular day, I discovered there was a snail up a tree. I'd never seen a
Mm.
snail up a tree before. I haven't really seen them very often since. But on this particular day, each of the trees that you can kind of see along here, each of those had its own individual snail, and they're all totally different shapes and
Mm.
sizes and patterns. Um, so it's just kind of a reminder that, there's stuff that you normally would never see, but
Yeah.
actually by paying a bit of attention and frankly being a bit desperate to get some different pictures, you suddenly unlock this whole world that you had no idea existed.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and I think
what has that brought you, Helen? So obviously the amazing pictures, and obviously you're becoming a more skillful photographer. What do you think the process of seeing the world, being in the present, and seeing those things that you'd normally miss or just discount? What do you feel it's sort of given you?
I think it gives you an appreciation that no matter how bad things might seem, and there's a whole heap of stuff that's outside of your control, and all kinds of awful things might be going on. But actually, all around you, quietly, there's flowers that are blooming, there are
Mm.
snails that are climbing up trees, that you kind of find things to appreciate in that moment that
Mm.
ordinarily you might not have done. And I think if you're in a really difficult place, that kind of gives you a tiny little bit of hope. And
Mm.
because you're starting to look for positive things, then that can help to sort of snowball a little bit in the same way that negative thoughts can spiral the other way.
Yeah.
So if you're in that really difficult place, that actually focusing on those little tiny things that you might not have noticed before, it can kind of give you a tiny bit of hope
Mm.
that actually the world isn't quite as bad as you fear, perhaps.
Yeah. Gosh, that's so valuable. Yeah.
Um, and noticing the world around you, so we tend to view the world, in my case, from sort of 5'9" typically. But kind of looking up and down can lead to some surprises as well. So on the left is the ceiling at Chastleton Manor in
Gosh.
their kitchen. So that's several hundred years of cooking detritus. But actually looks like it could be some sort of alien universe or
Yeah.
something. And then on the right, there was a morning where it had frozen overnight. I think it might have rained. But there's all these beautiful ice patterns on the paving. Um, so nature does really incredible things artistically. Um, so yeah, that was a fun thing to notice
Yeah.
because there's
Beautiful.
yeah, they're kind of like little creatures or something.
Yeah.
Um, and finding beauty in faded things. I've talked about faded tulips. So yeah, hours of fun. But also seed heads as well. So one of our assignments was to look at shadows. So I was running around the house with some dried seed heads that I had going, kind of going, what would this look like? So I think this
Mm.
is like the corner of one of our windows, kind of
Oh, I see. Yeah.
positioning positioning a seed head to see what it looked like.
Yeah.
And then into the wild. So as I've touched on, my main photography interest outside of the fun things that I do with my mobile phone is wildlife photography. We're really fortunate to have some wild owls near us. So this is a short-eared owl.
Now
So
this
I've
this
spent a
isn't
lot.
this isn't taken with a mobile phone now, isn't it? We've moved away from,
No,
yeah.
no, I'm afraid not.
Mm.
This is taken with my proper camera.
That's cool.
So that was trying to think. I think that's my 1DX Mark II with this 600 mm lens that I'd hired over Christmas last year. So the lens hire company that I sometimes use do a really great deal over Christmas because they don't want lenses in their warehouse. So for 3 days hire, you get 3 weeks with a lens,
Mm.
um, which was just great fun. And this was taken, I think it was pretty much as the light had all pretty much faded. All of the other photographers had gone home. So essentially it was me and the owl,
Wow.
um, and just a really incredible moment. You know, you spend a lot of time hoping that the owl might come near you. They're wild. They're busy hunting. They'll hunt wherever there's some good voles around.
Mm.
Um, so you know you can spend hours stood watching watching a field.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's moments when things like this happen, which are really special.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, that's another one. Converted that one to black and white.
Lovely.
But again, just that moment as the owl's
But
gliding along,
I could be
kind
wrong, but
of locks eyes with you.
it almost feels as if because I've seen some of your photographs where it's just I just say it's just, but it's the sky. It might be dawn. It might be, reaching the end of the day. And even if you don't
Yeah,
capture the owl, whatever you wanted, you've still got dramatic scenes that it sounds like you're more open to witnessing now.
yeah, absolutely. I think
Mm.
you notice them more, and especially as a photographer, you kind of ideally you want the owl and the light and the sky and.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, equally the days when the light isn't brilliant, even in the flat, sometimes in the flat light, they actually look better
Mm.
because you get more of the detail in the feathers, and the owl's more evenly lit,
Yeah,
as in this one.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, hours of fun.
Oh, I bet. And just out of interest, has has your photography and your art as well, the fact that, I know that you pride yourself in your sort of analytical brain of being able to solve difficult problems and come up with solutions, but you're having to paint and you can't copy things exactly as they appear in front of you. How has it impacted your engineering work, if it has?
Um, That's a really good question. I've not thought about how it affects my engineering as such. I do know that it's made me a hell of a lot happier as a person.
Mm.
Um, so yes, that's a good question. I've not really thought about it.
Mm. Maybe just the fact that it's made you happier, crikey, that's a big enough impact already.
Yeah, I think as a human being, that's a really good thing, right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. That's probably a lovely way to end. Helen, thanks so
Yeah.
much for sharing your interest and your passion for photography, but also in the way that you've illustrated the impact that it can have on the way you see the world and how it can positively impact, your well-being as well.
Yeah.
No, thank you very much.
Okay.